So you've known Donald Trump for 39
I
years.
think that's right, yeah, 39. He knew a lot more than me about lots of things, but I knew a lot more about presidential campaigns. I thought I could help him. And I was virtually, for the last 5 months, with him 24 hours a day. I was his body man. Jared helped put me there to try to calm the tweets down.
Oh.
See what a good job
Yes.
I did?
Keeping our republic is on the line, and it requires patriots with great passion, dedication, and eternal vigilance to preserve our freedoms. Jenny Beth Martin is the co-founder of Tea Party Patriots. She is an author, a filmmaker, and one of Time Magazine's most influential people in the world. But the title she is most proud of is mom to her boy-girl twins. She has been at the forefront, fighting to protect America's core principles for more than a decade. Welcome to the Jenny Beth Show.
My next guest needs no introduction. America's Mayor, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, recently joined Tea Party Patriot Citizens Fund in Metro Atlanta to help get out the vote for President Trump. In this episode, we discuss his transformative years as the mayor of New York City, his approach to reducing crime, and his relentless fight against corruption. Mayor Giuliani shares powerful stories from his career, insights on leadership, and his perspective on the current political challenges.
Mayor Giuliani, thank you so much for joining me today. So you were the mayor, America's mayor, and the mayor of New York City. And I'd like you to talk just a little bit about what you saw as you were mayor of New York City and the changes you made to New York City.
Of course, I was a New York native. I grew up in New York, went to school in New York. I was the U.S. attorney there, assistant U.S. attorney. I used to think before I was mayor that I could fix it because I knew everything that was wrong with it. I had put many of the politicians in New York in jail for corruption. I had put the mafia in jail and crushed them to some extent. I had put crooked Wall Street people in jail, prosecuted 2 Nazis, war criminals, terrorists. So I knew all the bad side of New York. And New York had gone through a lot of corruption scandals. In fact, I prosecuted one of them personally, and it was during that prosecution I said, I think I'm going to run for mayor. All my friends thought I was crazy. There had only been 2 other Republican mayors in 100 years. One of them turned Democrat, and the other was Fiorello LaGuardia. But I just felt like people would say I was naive. I felt like I really knew what to do, particularly about the crime, the welfare, the social issues surrounding New York. Probably didn't know the budget as well. I had to learn it. So I did, and I ran the first time, and I lost very, very narrowly. I got the largest vote any Republican had gotten since LaGuardia. Even Republicans who won hadn't gotten the vote that I got because they won in 3-way races. So that always kept me sort of alive as a candidate. And the person who defeated me, David Dinkins, was at the time thought of as the worst mayor in the history of New York City, now exceeded by de Blasio.
Right.
And kind of a little like Carter and Biden. You know, Trump is fond of saying that Carter is the happiest man in the world. Well, Dinkins too was very happy that de Blasio came along because he was terrible. But Dinkins had 2 major riots, including a pogrom, an anti-Jewish riot. He had the highest murder rates ever in the history of the city. Even when they came down, they were the highest in the history of the city. 2 years, I think we had over 2,000, then 1,900. We were the crime capital of America. We had 1.1 million people on welfare, and he was predicting we would go to 1.5, and his answer to it was to get more money to give away. And what I saw instead was an endless spiral. You get more money, you tax more rich and middle-class people leave, you have more poor people, then eventually who's going to support them? Eventually you become a communist, socialist society, which New York is now. New York is, by any definition, a socialist economy, communist economy. So I thought I would just go in and change it. What the heck? I mean, I had none of the problems that the prior mayors had. The prior mayors were all part of a 150-year corrupt Democrat machine. You could look at the last 150 years in New York, and unless you had a Republican or independent mayor, you most likely had tremendous corruption. The mayor may be involved or maybe not involved, but all the city officials taking money left and right. New York was well known for it, and the mafia making that even worse. So I won the second time, and I just began putting my program into effect. I did something unusual. I hired a special assistant, and his job was to make sure that we completed our promises. Because I did know from being I'd worked for President Reagan, he was my hero. I can very simply tell you I just imitated Reagan. Every time I had a hard decision, I'd say, what would my boss have done? And I did it. Like, for example, we had a strike. I fired all the people on strike. They came back in 2 days. Things like that. So I think I was successful because I didn't owe anything to anybody. The Democrats get elected, they're all part of the crooked 150-year machine in one way or another. They either have to participate in it or turn their back on it, and that makes New York City twice as expensive as the entire state of Florida, or as expensive as the entire state of Florida. Of course, we have much more corruption than they do. And I was an expert at cutting it, and I did. I reduced the budget, first time ever. I reduced taxes, first time ever. The 1.1 million people on welfare became 500,000.
Amazing.
Of which 500,000 had jobs. Because I started the first workfare program in the United States. Before Clinton and Newt, I started a workfare program. I actually borrowed it from the governor of Wisconsin, Tommy Thompson, who taught me about it. And I started a CompStat program to measure crime using computer technology and statistics. So I changed policing in New York from the goal is to make an arrest to the goal is to reduce crime. Because we would measure the crime reductions, and we would reward police officers, and we would reward their superiors where they would bring about a reduction in crime. So maybe that would be arrests, maybe that would be youth programs, maybe that would be infiltrating gangs. And then I think God was looking down on us. He blessed me with unbelievably talented people. It wasn't without tremendous cost. Before 9/11, I lost almost 100 firefighters and police officers in the line of duty. Every single one of them was like losing one of my relatives. I grew up in a family of 4 police officers and 1 fire captain. So I was in love with them. I mean, and I worked with them all my life. I was a prosecutor. So the New York City Police Department, even though I was a federal prosecutor, I used to bring them into all my federal cases because nobody investigates homicide like the New York City Police Department. And I just stuck to my guns. And just like now, when people say, oh, look what happened to Rudy Giuliani, he went crazy when he represented Trump. I'm the same person. They're the ones who changed. I'm still fighting for an innocent man who was framed by them, which we proved, but nobody wants to bother to look at it. When we say the election in 2020 was fixed, they should begin with the fact that I'm right because they covered up the hard drive. That was a major fraud.
Right.
I was accused for 17 months of being a Russian agent. None of them have done as much to investigate Russian spying as I did. I helped to invent the FISA program. I mean, the people that go after me have done 1/10 of what I've done for the country. And I do it happily. They do it because they want money, they want power, they want girlfriends. I mean, these people are, I don't know what has happened. I mean, when I started in government, some of my best friends were Democrats. Now they want to take away my law license. I've got 2 cases. They want to put me in jail until I'm dead. I'm 80 years old. I've got 40 years sentences that I'm looking at. I was prosecuted for being a lawyer. I was disbarred for being a lawyer.
It's amazing.
Some places that are, the Washington bar is, the deep state has an awful lot of lawyers who are prostitutes A lot of them belong to the D.C. bar. New York is about as left-wing as the Soviet Union was before they changed. And that bar association has been anti-conservative, going back to Bork. So to get me was fabulous. I mean, they really hated the fact that I was such a successful mayor. You'll never see the New York Times saying that. I reduced crime more than any mayor in the history of the city. Reduced crime more than any mayor in the history of America. And welfare. You'll never hear that in the Times.
No.
They'll just skip over me. They'll make it as if Bloomberg did it. Now, Bloomberg did a great job. But Bloomberg had to take up a city that was already announced as the rejuvenation capital of America by Time magazine. It was a city that already was, for 4 years in a row, the safest large city in America. It was a city that had the best welfare to work program, the best children's program. It was the city that withstood September 11th,
Right.
which nobody ever thought it could, and came out stronger. Now, Mike did a really good job at carrying it on, but he didn't do it.
No, you
He
did.
didn't take over the city with riots whenever anybody wanted to have one, 2,000 murders a year, 10,000 felonies a week. I mean, it was ridiculous. I respect him very much for continuing what I did. I don't even hold him responsible for this, but I truly resent the people who make it appear as if, gee, there wasn't a Giuliani. Without a Giuliani, wouldn't have been done. Mike is not the kind of personality that could have done what I did. You got to be like me or Trump to get these kinds of things done.
Well, and you reduced crime. You truly reduced crime. What we have seen in the last several months from the Department of Justice is they've tried to say that crime has been reduced in America, yet
It's
it
outrageous
hasn't.
what they've
They came back and changed their statistics for it, and they have not required big cities like New York and San Francisco and Phoenix, Arizona to actually report crime. So crime, if you're not reporting crime in big cities, it's going to look like it's gone down. And it's so disingenuous, but what you did was a true reduction of crime.
Yeah, well, I didn't do it for ABC, CBS, or I did it because it was a part of my strategy. It was like fighting a war. I needed the right statistics so I knew where to put my police. I'll give you an example, a little exaggerated and simplified, but it makes the point. One of the biggest problems in New York has always been crime in the subway. It really isn't the biggest problem. It's psychological to some extent. A crime in the subway is more frightening than a crime on the street, so it gets even more. So the New York City mayors, from the time I was a kid, were running on, I'm going to put police in every subway car. I'm going to put police in every subway car. None of them ever did it, but they would promise it. And then they tried to put the police in the subway cars. So when we did our first CompStat analysis, scientific, if you will, analysis of crime, it turned out that 75% of the crime was taking place on the platform, and 75% of the cops were in the cars. So the criminals were waving at the cops, going by in the subway trains, or they're beating the hell out of people. We basically flipped it, and crime went down 70%. And then we kept doing it. My last police commissioner, Bernie Carrick, took over Rikers Island for me. Rikers Island was the most dangerous prison in the world. 60 Minutes wanted to come in after he was commissioner for a few years to show that we really didn't do anything. 60 Minutes did a piece was unbelievable. I think they regretted coming in. They did a piece that he did a miracle. He brought crime down, violence in the jail 90%. We had 12,000 people there. They only have 4,000 people. They have 3 times the amount of crime now. I'm going to tell you why. It wasn't a game for us. These people, why? Because it's a game. It's more about the cocktail parties, the bar association pat you on the head. You're getting invited, getting the right awards, money, position. Money afterwards, position afterwards. How many of the defense people go to work for defense contractors? How many of them rely on that security clearance that they shouldn't have in order to make millions? The 51 people who said that Trump and I were basically Russian stooges were dead wrong. They were proven wrong.
Right.
They knew they were wrong when they did it. None of them should have security clearances anymore. Their pictures should be taken down from the CIA. And I mean, we wonder why intelligence was so bad in the 20 years leading up to Trump. Well, these are the bums that did it.
Right.
People who would lie and sell their soul because they wanted Biden in, because Biden will give them a better security clearance and they can make more from Raytheon or whoever they're selling themselves to. And when they say all this money that we're giving to Ukraine, right? I love the Ukrainian people. I've worked in Ukraine. I've built emergency centers there, and I've built safety programs there. I know some of those cities. I know the streets in some of those cities. However, if you think by giving money to Zelensky, you're getting money to Ukrainian people, dollar for dollar, you're out of your mind. Zelensky is a product of a completely corrupt system. The guy who made him was the chief money launderer in Ukraine, who could tell you where Joe Biden's offshore bank accounts are, but won't. Zelensky could tell you about the extra money that Biden's got, and a lot of other American politicians. He can also tell you the kind of bribes his predecessor got. He's got everything on everybody in that country because his patron was laundering all their money, including a transaction for the Bidens that I have the paperwork on. So this is like a real negotiation. Zelensky comes in and says, I want another $8 billion. And he says to Biden, well, just put out the pictures that Giuliani doesn't have. And who's helping the people of Ukraine? They got him in a war. Biden will let him win the war. Harris will let him win the war. Maybe they can't because we have a nuclear war. I don't know. That's a hard one to assess. But right now, they're just getting killed for nothing, except for one reason. The money is flowing. The money is like what Arafat did with Clinton. The money is flowing. The money is flowing. And then we get people like McConnell, our esteemed majority leader, who says, well, the money, I'm just imitating him now. Well, the money is going through the American military industrial complex. Like, I'm supposed to believe that makes it honest? The reason we have a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is because our defense industry was bribing everybody all around the world. I mean, they were smearing everybody they could, including some of the worst dictators in the world. So Ukraine's been dividing up money with them for years. And you're gonna sell me on the fact that this is all getting to the people? I mean, we've given them $160 billion. We've given Israel 14. Who's more important to us?
Israel's certainly been a more loyal ally of ours over the years.
And critical for us. I mean, they're like a hell of an army. That's an army you want on your side.
It's the kind of army that if you're in a war, you want your army to fight like that so we win.
Yeah.
And they're serious about winning.
And Bibi has exactly the attitude my hero had about the Cold War. How's their Cold War going to end?
Right.
They lose, we win.
Right.
Only way you can face it. Only way you can face these bullies down, not with this ridiculous Harris, Biden,
appeasement.
Ceasefire. They were telling Bibi to have a ceasefire before the war began. I mean, they attack him. They kill and rape women and children. He mounts an army to invade.
They take American hostages.
And American hostages. We forgot about.
Right.
But it doesn't matter to Biden. He got so many killed in Afghanistan, he probably can't even count anymore. So all of a sudden, first thing you hear from Biden and Harris is ceasefire. He hadn't even invaded yet. So what side are they on? They give money to Iran.
Yeah. It's horrible. I met President Trump as then a businessman and a candidate for the first time at our rally that we did against the Iran deal on Capitol Hill. And Ted Cruz was there and Donald Trump.
I remember the rally. I wasn't at it, but I remember the rally. I've been involved in that cause since about 2008 or 2009.
I learned a lot about the existential threat that Iran poses to our country and to Israel. And when I saw what happened on October 7th of last year, I actually had to do media that morning. I was on Newsmax and I was sitting there watching this unfold and I just was shocked, but I knew we have to stand for Israel. And I'm not a foreign affairs or an expert on national security, but there are some things that I know, and we have to stand up for Israel.
Yeah.
And when a country has has what happened to it in Israel. Was watching it happen, and it reminded me so much of 9/11. And
Me
the
too.
world rallied around America, and Israel deserved to have the world rally around it as well in that time. And I think that the world was in and out of rallying around Israel, and has been in and out of rallying around Israel. But I continue to stand for them. On September 11th, you and I just went to lunch, and the restaurant owner, it was a restaurant that really does a lot to honor veterans. The
Beautiful.
owner was a Marine,
Yeah.
and he wanted your photo next to the 9/11 flag. Um, he- and I could tell you were just very moved looking at that flag, recognizing some of the names that were on it.
I looked at those names in little print, and then every third name, one of my firefighters, one of my police officers, families I've gotten to know since then, and the various and all the efforts we've made to take care of the people who've gotten ill after funerals I spoke at, where I remember the children, and now I get to see them in they're 20 years old plus. Some of them, some of the funerals, the women were pregnant. My assistant, Beth, my assistant for 30-something years, was married to Captain Terry Hatton. They had gotten married. They were having a little difficulty having a baby. They were a beautiful couple. And she found out she was pregnant 10 days after Terry died.
Oh.
And now little Terry, who obviously had to deal with a lot of things, has come through it just great. She's a college graduate, and she's just a very remarkable young lady. Just a combination of her dad, who was, he was actually, I think, our most decorated firefighter. He ran as captain. He ran the rescue company #1 in Manhattan, which has to deal with the most complex fires when they get out of hand.
On 9/11, I remember thinking that you had run, and shortly thereafter, so maybe not necessarily on 9/11, but you had run against Hillary, and you did not become senator. And then I watched you deal with the aftermath of 9/11, and I thought that sometimes things
Got
happen.
prostate cancer.
Wow.
I was going to run. I was somewhat torn about whether to run or not, because I never wanted to be in the Senate.
Well, it's probably good that you were not. Man, what a,
But I was going to do it.
yes,
I was going to do it really to prevent her.
right.
And then I got prostate cancer right in the middle of it, and I had to do 8 weeks of treatment, and it would have been a very close race anyway. I could have lost a race pretty easily. I could have won it. And I thought, well, somebody else has got to do it. I can't do this. And that's why I devoted so much effort to to Donald Trump. Not only was he my friend, but he was running against a person that I thought should never be within 100 miles of the White House. And instead, we put somebody in there that shouldn't be within 10,000 miles of the White House.
It's true. So you've known Donald Trump for 39 years.
I think that's right. Yeah, 39 years.
How did you get to know him to begin
I got
with?
to know him really for two reasons. We had a very close mutual friend, George Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees. Donald, which I used to be able to call him then. Since the moment he became president, it's Mr. President-elect and Mr. President. No, Mr. Former President, is it? Mr. President.
Mr. President.
And then also he got involved. He got involved in challenging Mayor Koch to do the Wollman Rink, and I had investigated a lot of the Wollman Rink, which was one of those New York City corruption projects. The Columbus Circle building was also they sold it about 4 times, and Koch got tired of it, and Trump came along and said, I can do it in 9 months. And Koch said, no, you can't. Yes, I can. No, you can't. He did it in 7.
Wow.
And I was at the ceremony, and Mr. Trump then got Koch all upset when he said, you should name the rink after me. Now, he was joking.
Right.
Koch got so angry.
Just laugh. Sometimes they should laugh.
When I first started to run for mayor, I was going to run against Ed Koch. So he supported me right from day one. he's been one of my most consistent political supporters before I was his. And he supported me when I ran for president, supported me when I ran for re-election. I mean, he supported me in all of my campaigns. And I was going to support him, but probably get involved much later. And then they attacked him over, remember when he came down the stairs and he said, the people that are coming in are animals. Now, I knew exactly what he meant because I lived in the same city he did. We were just getting MS-13. The signature of MS-13 is they come into a town, usually small. They grab a couple of kids, chop their heads off, and leave them in a public place. They had just done that on Long Island. To me, you're insulting animals if you call them animals. And I thought they were very unfair. And I thought he was hitting on a problem that they had been ignoring. And so I volunteered to help him. And I had been through being U.S. attorney, working for Ronald Reagan. I had run my own presidential campaign. I was John McCain's chief surrogate. I knew he knew a lot more than me about lots of things, but I know a lot more about presidential campaigns, and I thought I could help him. And I was virtually, for the last 5 months, with him 24 hours a day. I was his body man. Jared helped to put me there to try to calm the tweets down.
Oh.
See what a good job
Yes.
I did?
I think that, you know.
And then I realized those tweets were winning the election for us.
Well, not only that, but he just showed that you don't actually have to have the mainstream media to be able to communicate with the public.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most amazing things I think about all of the social media platforms, especially then Twitter and now X.
If any voter would just want to take one question like, what are you going to do on the first day you're president, and compare his answer to Kamala Harris. She, first of all, she still hasn't answered it. Well, I came from the middle class, and I've always wanted to help the middle class, and I have aspirations for what we're going to do for the middle class, so we're going to have aspirations. The first day she goes into office, she's going to sit in the Oval Office, she's going to aspirate, which I don't know exactly what that is, aspirating. But we don't know what they ask him, I'm going to close the border.
Right. Seal the border.
Well, first thing I think I'll do is close the border. Then I'll start my process of cutting the regulations in half, which he did last time.
Yes.
In fact, our original economic revival came about by the dramatic reduction in regulations that he did before the tax reduction.
Yes.
Closing the border just means doing what he did before that they reversed.
Right.
I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, to do away with stay in Mexico is evil.
It is.
It's absolutely evil, just because he would get credit for it. I mean, actually, you'll get Bloomberg. When Bloomberg became a mayor, he kept all my programs. Maybe he got rid of one or two that he didn't like, but he kept all my programs. And then he improved on them. That's what you're supposed to do. He didn't get rid of them because, I want to be different than Giuliani, because he's a sensible man. It just shocked me. Stay in Mexico, I negotiated something similar for Ronald Reagan with the Haitian government, but this was much broader and much better. The minute he got that in, I said, man, he's going to turn this around. So you look at the last year that's when it was in effect. The last year when he was president, he had about 400,000 that were caught. Mm-hmm. This guy's had 10 million. Do you know more people have come in illegally under him than in all the years of Ellis Island?
Yes.
Ellis Island was 60 years. This was 3.5 years.
Yes.
And we knew who came in Ellis Island.
Right.
And we stopped a lot of them.
Right.
And we put them in hospitals for 30 days. And we put them in little detention places until we found out if they were criminals or not. Now, the ones that come in, we hardly vet them. We asked the Chinese 4 questions. I don't know, maybe we ask them about Chinese food, I don't know. But we sure as heck don't do a good job of keeping the spies out there all over the place, terrorizing Americans who are of Chinese background. They'll go find some poor Chinese person who's here, for 100 years, and they'll go back to his family, and they'll say, if you don't do this for us, great-grandfather so-and-so is going to have his toes cut off.
You mentioned earlier today that you've gone to China twice, and the second time you got thrown out of the country.
Well,
maybe not exactly thrown out, but
meeting.
Right, meeting. Okay.
I went there, and I was having a good discussion with the head of the Communist Party in Beijing, because I am aware of the fact that the mayor of Beijing is a little puppet. And any place you go, it's the party agent who's in charge. It's like the teachers union. The principal doesn't run the school. The teachers union, a la the Communist Party, runs the school. So we were having a very good discussion, and we got to Taiwan. And he said to me that I should go back and I should tell President Bush that we should stay out of Taiwan and that Taiwan should be part of them. And I answered him by saying, maybe that'd be easier if you became a democracy. I mean, it took Taiwan a while after Chiang Kai-shek went in to become a democracy. They didn't do it overnight. They're very proud of the fact they're a democracy. Why the hell would they want to be connected to you? You're a dictatorship. Well, the guy's smiling at me. And I'm thinking, wow, that must have been really persuasive. And then my interpreter says to me, he didn't interpret it correctly.
Oh, no.
He said he told them that you're going to pass along the message. Well, first of all, I was not a messenger for Bush. I mean, they just assumed that. But second, so I said, no, I want you to interpret it correctly. He said, are you sure? I said, yeah, interpret it correctly. So we told him what I said. The guy who had been charming offered me tea, this, presents, whatever. Stands up, says, Mayor Giuliani, our meeting is over. Shakes hands. I walk out, and I had these Chinese guides that were helping me. I see them being told to disappear. And I was in Beijing. Lucky I ran a security company. Me and my security people. And I never saw another Chinese official since then. Never been invited back. Unlike Tampon Tim, who's been invited back 30 times to teach. And he brings our children there. And I know, and I wish Americans knew this better, you don't get invited back there 30 times unless you are saying exactly what they want you to say, and you are of value to them. And I don't know. I don't have to be a genius to figure out what he does. People wonder, how do we have all these young Marxists? Because we got a lot of Tampon Tims that have been turned to ingratiate themselves to China. That's why the guy says things like, one man's socialism is another man's neighborliness. Yeah, except neighborliness hasn't killed 100 million people. Well, socialism has.
Well, and also neighborliness is doing something out of the goodness of your heart.
I don't know what Tampon Tim would know about neighborliness. He wanted people arrested if they had more than 6 people at the Thanksgiving dinner, and he wanted you to rat on your neighbors.
That's exactly right. And what socialism is compulsion. If you don't do this, you're going to jail, or we're going to take more money from you. That is
right.
That is compulsion. It isn't doing something out of the goodness of your heart. It isn't charity. It isn't compassion. It's compulsion.
Yeah, that's why it always ends in tremendous violence.
Right.
Every example of a socialist society is tremendous violence. And there really is, people get confused. Socialism comes from Karl Marx, and communism comes from Karl Marx, and socialism is merely the economic system of a communist state. So trying to make socialism like less dangerous than communism it's going to lead you to the same result.
It does.
Which is revolution, violence, secret police. When somebody realizes they're being completely misused and lied to, the normal person gets angry. And then when you realize that all the people at the top of a communist society are multi-billionaires, you realize it's a complete, even I think Marx would agree with this, satanic creation of Karl Marx, because Marx was a Satanist.
When you were just saying that the billionaires are the ones who are at the top, when you look at what happens with the Democratic Party, they lied about Joe Biden's well-being. They lied about his mental capacity over and over and over. And for those of us who called out like the trip that he had to Europe for World War II's anniversary, they said it was all deep fake and not real, and we were being wrong and trying to have misinformation by calling out his behavior, which was alarming as you watch him.
Well,
and
you can see Georgia Maloney. I wonder what I know her a bit. I wonder, but I have not ever asked what. She's looking at him. He's walking off. It looked like he was going to go with the skydivers.
And she had to guide him back over, and somehow they called this deep fakes. And then 2 weeks later, he does a debate, and clearly he's not okay.
All of a sudden.
Right. Yes, all of a sudden.
Kamala never saw it over those 4 years.
They're lying, and the American people
course
know
they're
that they're lying. They know, because you sit there and you watch that
terrible
debate,
thing.
and you know that debate was not something that just happened overnight. This is what happens when people are declining, and I don't wish it on anyone. I don't wish it on Joe Biden. He is a president, and as president, you wind up getting called out for your behavior. And then they anoint Kamala Harris, and then they have the audacity to say you and I are against democracy. They actually literally prevented a primary from happening with their party.
They also say that Trump is going to put his enemies in jail. Well, that's exactly what Biden and Harris have done. Like me.
Yes. And David
Like Steve
Shaver
Bannon.
here in Georgia,
Like Steve
Steve
Bannon.
Bannon.
Steve Bannon. Peter Navarro needed to be put in leg irons.
Mike Roman.
I mean, we are talking
Tyler
about,
Boyer. The list
we're
goes
talking about
on and on.
We're talking
Yes.
about fascist tactics
Yes.
by these people. I realized a while back with the Russian collusion thing, because how I got involved in catching Biden is I got a call saying, you know, this Russian collusion thing, I have a source, this person told me, that will tell you there was no Russian collusion. It was Ukrainian collusion. They used the Ukrainians to help them create a lot of the false documents. Ukraine was a major supporter of Hillary illegally. Remember, the ambassador of Ukraine supported her.
Yes.
And they also created a lot of false documents for her, and she paid for them. And nothing happened in Russia. In fact, the guy Steele who wrote it hadn't been in Russia in 17 years. I said, well, I kind of know that, but can I prove it? He said, I got 5 Ukrainian witnesses that can prove it, but the State Department is blocking them from coming in. And that's how I got started. And then when they came in to see me, they said, you know, the biggest thing of all is the big bribe that Biden got involved in with the president of Ukraine. Everybody in Ukraine knows about it. I said, what? I knew Joe. 35 years I knew Joe. I was introduced to him by my chief of staff, who went to law school with him, as God's honest truth, the dumbest man in my law school class, who cheated his way through. He failed out of the first year, wrote a paper, he plagiarized in the paper, and then he cozied up to the dean's wife, and they let him go through. So the last guy you wanted to sit next to on an exam was Joe, because they accused you of cheating, because he was constantly leaning over. You remember he got kicked out of the '88 election for being a pathological liar. The left-wing reporters concluded, thank God we caught him before he became president, because he's a pathological liar. And then we put him in at a critical time. We knew he was demented before. It's before he ran that he said, I used to watch Franklin Roosevelt on the television reading the comics. Franklin Roosevelt died before there were televisions, and it was LaGuardia who read the comics, and he did it on the radio, not on television. It's also when he said that he liked being a lifeguard because he would put his legs in the water,
Right.
and the little children would touch his hair. That made the little hair I had, stand up.
It's alarming. The things that
And if you ever got to see the hard drive that I got to see, you'd be even more alarmed. And that was all before he got elected.
right,
So he went in there
with all of that
with the
behind him.
disease,
Right.
with doctors who I put on a podcast in August of 2020 saying they disagreed a little. One thought it was early dementia, but that it is possible by the time he's in there for 2-3 years. This disease is unpredictable, but one thing it doesn't do, you never get better. The second guy said he's further along than you think. And he did very, very interesting analysis of how he loses his train of thought. And he said, first thing that happens is you lose your short-term memory. But it's very rare that you lose your short-term memory, like you don't remember what you're talking about. You forget what you had for breakfast. But I don't forget now that I'm talking about Joe Biden. He said, that's usually a pretty serious case. So I've been in contact with him throughout, and every time I would talk to him, they said, this guy shouldn't be anywhere near a red button.
Right. I've heard doctors say that the shuffling that he does also is a sign that before the debate.
She covered this
Right.
all up.
Yeah. Either she covered it up, or she lied and she wasn't around him like she says she is. One or the other, but either way isn't good for her. She because either way makes her not be truthful with the American people. Either she was around him a lot and covered it up, which is not being truthful with the American people, or she wasn't around him and didn't see it and is lying now, saying that she was there with every major
Yeah,
decision that he
yeah.
made.
I mean, you
One
can't
way or
have it
the
both
other.
ways.
Yeah,
It's one
right.
or the other. But it's a terrible thing to do to the country. You shouldn't have a Republican or a Democrat that doesn't have the mental capacity to do the most difficult job in the world.
No, you
You
shouldn't.
don't have to be a genius, but you sure as hell have to have your marbles, and you have to have common sense.
That
Sometimes I think it's better if you have common sense and you're not a genius.
in common sense, and maybe you don't know the whole political system inside and out, because the system,
Common sense, yeah.
yeah, it's common sense. So what do you think are the biggest issue for voters this election cycle, and what do you think that Trump supporters can do to help other voters?
I think the biggest issue, as always, is the economy.
Hmm.
I think the biggest issue should be the deprivation of our God-given civil rights that has been the greatest in the history of this country by this administration. I think I think in history it will be. In history, this will be seen as an era, really black era in our history. Every one of the amendments that grants rights in the first 10, they've torn up. Freedom of religion. They closed churches and kept open strip joints, including Tampon Tim and Mayor Whitlis, who likes to give out communion, mock communion.
With Doritos?
Then we have freedom of speech. I got canceled every time I said anything about the election. How about when I started saying that the vaccine wasn't a vaccine because it didn't cure the disease?
Oh, they cancel you for that.
They owe me an apology for that. I was right, they were wrong.
Right.
They owe me an apology for throwing me off over Russian collusion and the hard drives.
Yes.
I was right, they were wrong. That never gets
No.
worked out. I think the biggest issue is they've brought us to the point where the last time he ran for president, he was trying to prevent them from making us a kind of communist state with fascist tactics. We have become that. We are that now. There are people sitting in prison that would never have been in prison under any other administration and would only be in prison in a place like China or the Soviet Union or Hitler's Germany or Venezuela.
Right. And they have the audacity
To say that
he's going to do it.
that. He could have prosecuted her.
Yes,
I thought he should.
right. He could have gone after Biden or Hunter Biden, given what, I mean, that's why they started
He
the
could have gone
impeachment in
after
the
her.
first
He could
place.
have gone after her. He could
Yes.
have put Comey in jail. He could have put Brennan in jail.
He didn't.
He could have gone after all of them. Now, they're the ones who went after
Yes,
his people.
yes,
That's what they do. And it also is a tactic of communism.
yes,
I mean, even discussed by Orwell, projection.
right.
They throw you off what they're doing by accusing you of doing it.
That's right. And I have seen this happen from the beginning of the Tea Party movement with accusations of racism or sexism. One time I was on an airplane with a man who found out that I was a co-founder of the Tea Party movement and that I supported Trump. And so this liberal man who was friends with Hillary or worked with her or something, he said that I was sexist, xenophobic, and that he had talked to psychiatrists and realized that people like me don't even like women, that I'm a woman who doesn't like women, that I hate all women. And I just looked at the man and I just,
discussion on the plane.
yes,
you
yes.
revealed all that.
And so I said, you are the most sexist man and most person who is most likely to stereotype people that I have met in weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe years. And he was like, what? And I said, yes, you are prejudging me. You are prejudiced. You're prejudging me. You don't know the first thing about me, except that I started this movement. I guarantee you don't know what the movement is about. And yet you've just said that I hate all women. How dare you? And he was so, I was like, you are sexist. And he was so taken aback that I said that, but how dare he say that to me? But that's what they do. They project who they are onto everyone else. He probably hated all women. The way he was treating me certainly sounded like a man who didn't respect women.
Yeah, some of them learn it like through these people who train them, like Biden. Not Biden, Obama was trained by communists and Hillary was trained by communists. They really learn these tactics.
Right.
And it becomes part of them, and the others just borrow it from them. I remember the first time I attacked Soros for putting in all the DAs that have gotten so many black children killed. I mean, there's a guy that probably is responsible for more black deaths than anybody since slavery, because he's got about 50 DAs. I mean, in my city, there are 7,000 to 10,000 people walking around the streets that should be in jail. You look at Chicago, every weekend it's 20 homicides, 70% black. Philadelphia, 2 years in a row, record number of homicides under Biden, Soros DA. Soros DAs were in all the places that Harris got the rioters released from. People always wondered, why do they get released? Every one of those places has a crooked DA put in by Soros's millions. So once they accused me of being anti-Semitic for attacking Soros, well, this is the last guy you're going to accuse of being anti-Semitic. I mean, I put Nazis to their death. I tried the cases. I tried one that was very, very controversial, in which Pat Buchanan opposed it. However, I threw Arafat out of the UN.
Good.
So I said, I'm a better Jew than Soros. And he never asked me to explain why. The simple reason is, I had a lot of Jewish friends. I never sent him to a concentration camp. That's how he kept himself alive.
Wow.
So think about, and then he said that was the happiest days of his life on 60 Minutes. Think of what that does to a man's brain when he does that. He and his son are such destructive forces. Oh. He supported all at once Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Joe Biden. He's the biggest contributor to all these recent protests. He probably had put the most money into the burning down of American cities. And then what he's done to our criminal justice system is unforgivable. The people that he's gotten killed, St. Louis, record number of homicides. These things have existed for a long time. It's no accident that under Biden and Harris, they've had the most homicides in the history of the city.
It's just, it's awful what has happened in our countries. I think that there's so many reasons for people to vote for Trump. And Kamala Harris and Joe Biden make us less safe. They make us as individuals, and they make us as the United States less safe at a national level and at a local level. We are just not as safe. There's more crime. They treat criminals better than they treat people
100%.
who are victims or who are not even a criminal or a victim. And they've opened the borders. We're sitting in the county that Laken Riley, the student who was killed at UGA, she was from this county. She was a year older than my children. Her first grade teacher was my children's first grade teacher. I didn't know her, so I always am very cautious and careful to say that. But their lawlessness has real effects. This community mourned her death. There were red and black ribbons all over the community for months and months and months because people wanted to remember her. In fact, there's a 5K next weekend in her memory.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. That one moved me a lot. But also, I think maybe if the family could focus on this, it might help. That was a turning point. That was the one that got us to realize that this is a illegal migrant, alien crime problem. For a long, long time, New York Times, even the Wall Street Journal would say, oh, the illegals that come in don't commit as much crime as the Americans. And, if I go back to when I was in charge of immigration, which would be in the 80s, and I handled the Mariel boat lift and the Haitian migration, it was true. The American crime was of a higher nature, maybe not Mariel, that was it, but It isn't that they didn't commit crime. They didn't commit as much as we did. And also, I always thought that was a bit of a silly argument because we're stuck with our crime. Why should we bring in any crime?
Right.
But in any event, they were right. That changed. They refused to realize there's a totally different group of illegal alien than we had in the 80s and the 90s, who were largely Mexicans coming over to work.
Right.
And then criminals mixed in with them and drug dealers mixed in with them because they could hide in between the spaces, right? This is completely wide open, unvetted, unexamined groups of people.
Right.
The ones that we catch, we know very little about. Then there's a whole group that we see, we write a little something down about them, we have no idea who they are. And then there's a whole group that could be 50 to 100% of the number we know about that come in all those places that are wide open that we don't secure, and that we have more of a problem securing when a lot of people are coming over in the legitimate places. So when he says 20 million, they say, well, how does he get there? I'll tell you how he gets there. There are 10 million that have been documented. There's a study by MIT that's about 12 years old now that says that you can take that number and increase it by 50 to 200% in any given year. And the more stress, the more people. So there's no question, bare minimum, 5 million, maximum 10 million people who we never saw. We don't know who they are. And it stands to reason that the cartels would bring in the most dangerous people that way, because that's where they get the big money. I want to bring in, I'm a Chinese fentanyl guy. I want to bring in $2 billion worth of fentanyl. I don't want to take a risk. I give them $100 grand. They'll get me in. They know the border better than we do. That's why they become so powerful. Nobody even talks about this. But Biden, if I explain this to Biden, I know him. He's too stupid to even understand it when he was saying. I really believe, I'm sorry to say this, all those word salads, that's the indication of a very weak intellect. One that can't reason. She can't reason in logical progressions. So she gets all confused, and she keeps repeating the same thing. Middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class, middle class. Then she was on that thing, joy, 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 joy. Now we're no more joy now.
With Brett Baer.
No
Let me
joy with-
finish. Let me finish.
Yeah,
Are you going to let me finish? I mean, it was the
All
same
she's
line
doing is
over and
repeating
over.
And she was just repeating the same thing.
Yes. Yes. That is a very interesting observation because that's what she does. And in each of these interviews,
What,
it's
she
the
failed
same.
the bar exam. She doesn't know how to reason.
She can't keep anything in her head for very long, apparently. Okay, so we're wrapping up. What would you tell people who haven't voted why they should vote for Donald Trump? And if they have voted and they voted for him, what do they need to be doing in the last weeks?
I think that I hate to do it this way because I legitimately really care for the man and I know what a good man he is. But even if you think he's whatever you think he is, he certainly isn't going to deprive us of democracy. He had already been president for 4 years. He didn't do anything to democracy but expand it. He gave Biden a totally peaceful world, and Biden and Harris have given us a world at more war than I can remember in a very long time, and at risk of going into a world war. And no one's exaggerating that when you see what China is doing. They got a bigger Navy than we do now. That isn't right. They shouldn't have a bigger Navy than we do. He is going to have us functioning the way we functioned 4 or 5 years ago. You got to be out of your mind if you think we're better off now than we were for. If you do, you're lost. I can't help you. But when Ronald Reagan asked that question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? It was clear we weren't. Now it's even clearer. And the reality is, I'll ask you another question. Where do you think we're going to be 4 years from now if we get this in the White House? Because they're just going to keep going.
Right.
I mean, we could be part of one world government, which is what they really want. So you got to vote. You got to vote for your children because it's your job to turn over an America that's better than the one turned over to you, and we're failing at our job. I'm 80 years old. I don't want to die and leave behind a country that's worse than the one that was given to me. So I will stay up 24 hours a day. I will do anything to get people to vote for Trump because I personally know he can do it. I don't even have a doubt that he can do it. And I have become enormously impressed with Vance. And no, I didn't know Vance very well. I might have picked somebody else because I didn't know him that well. But now I've dealt with him. I've watched him. That's an exceptional man. And I mean, he's an exceptional talent and an exceptional American. And here's what great presidents have: Reagan, Trump, even the Bushes. They love America. I once said, got in a lot of trouble, Obama's biggest problem is he doesn't love America. Biden's biggest problem is he's a pathological narcissist, and he couldn't possibly love anything but Biden, which is why he stole so much money. And the other one, she shouldn't be in a serious job. I mean, she expresses herself as a frivolous person. That's what she should be doing, frivolous things.
Well,
What they should do, take out a piece of paper. First of all,
my app.
call you
Yes.
and help
Right.
with your organization.
Right.
And I was very impressed. You're working with a lot of different organizations
Yes, sir.
to get out the vote. So you'll know where to place them. But if you've already done that or you can't do that, just take out a piece of paper and write down your friends' names. More than likely, nowadays, the way things are, your friends are going to be voting for Trump. Because if you are for Trump, you're not going to have too many friends left.
Right.
Maybe I have 2 left. I'm not even sure. So write down the name of your friends. Just check in, make sure. People sometimes don't vote for the silliest reason. And I would say, just God forbid you have a cold that day, vote early. I know us Republicans don't want to. The ideal system would be 1 day of voting on a holiday with a paper ballot to back up everything.
Right.
But we don't have that right now, so we got to play by the rules we got. So the rules we got are 10 days of voting. Let's take advantage of it. I will vote early this year, and I normally liked voting on. I had a whole little procedure that I followed on election day. Particularly when I ran for luck, I used to go to the polls, check the polls, then I voted. Then I would play ball with my son and relax, and then I won. So I kept doing it. But now I'm going to vote. I vote in Florida now. So now I'm going to vote the first day or two to make sure I get it in and have all my energy for helping other people to vote. But write down, become your own little, even if you're going to join others, become your own little vote getter. People are always asking, what can I do? This time, that's what you can do. Write down the names, even if you're here and they're in Nevada, your friends call them up. You're voting for sure, need any help? I'll pay for Uber, whatever.
Right. Very good. Well, Rudy Giuliani, it was just a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you so much for joining me.
It was good for my heart to see what you got going here, because I'm so worried. If this were any other election, at any other time, I would have a very strong feeling that we're going to win, and that we're going to win by a discernible margin, even a chance for a big one. But I just won't allow myself to feel that. I saw what happened to us in 2020. I mean, Dr. Maria, my business partner, hadn't seen Speaker Gingrich since election night in the White House. And as we departed, and I was going to go upstairs to the private residence, he said, Maria, we're together here on a historic occasion, the re-election of Donald. There's no way they can overcome these numbers. The 800,000 in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Can't overcome that.
Yes. Yes, he did.
I said, oh boy,
We are going to do all that we can to get out the vote with our super PAC, Tea Party Patriot Citizens Fund. And it is a pleasure getting to know you and have you. Thank you so much, Rudy.
The Jenny Beth Show is hosted by Jenny Beth Martin, produced by Kevin Mooneyhan, and directed by Luke Livingston. The Jenny Beth Show is a production of Tea Party Patriots Action. For more information, visit teapartypatriots.org.
If you like this episode, let me know by hitting the like button or leaving a comment or a 5-star review. And if you want to be the first to know every time we drop a new episode, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for whichever platform you're listening on. If you do these simple things, it will help the podcast grow, and I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.